today is May the 17th, which makes it day 58 of our lockdown, which I'm losing all perspective on how much time that is now. This is life now.
Day 58 of all of the days.
Well, there's a few things that we've got to talk about today, but I might be a bit crabby, and that's because I've just had a bit of a little interchange with an anti-lockdown person on the internet, who claims that somebody who suggests that people who are against lockdown are unempathetic is just the resort of a desperate resort of people who are unable to interpret people's behaviour and are unable to cite multiple sources. So anyone who has been watching this since March will know that I do my reading on this. I have cited multiple sources. I have been reading and honestly, I have been looking for the counter arguments, and I haven't found any that don't sound like the Tin Hat Brigade. Now, I will
sent a lot of links to a lot of articles.
Yeah, he reads very few of them. No.
I read about a third.
Yeah. Usually it's just that I've got the links so that I can quote them here.
Sometimes I do my own reading outside of links that Ellie sent me.
But yeah, now, I will say there was potentially at one time a legitimate anti-lockdown argument if, when all of this was kicking off in Asia, we had then implemented a strict immigration policy of anybody coming in from high-risk countries, or even better, a ban of flights from high-risk countries or hotspots, and a very strict quarantine procedure, health checks, thermal imaging, and, more importantly, a very well-equipped tracking and testing sort of resource for anyone coming from hotspot areas before the virus was rampant in the community. Yeah, if we'd done all of that, then we potentially could have avoided having a lockdown at all, or at the very least, quite a minimal one. But that didn't happen. Now coronavirus has been confirmed, I think, in every single place in the country. So now the only thing we can do to keep this down is have implemented lockdown and continue with lockdown. There's a lot of chatter going on about whether or not in England it will be safe for schools to reopen on the 1st of June. Now, a couple of things to weigh in on that. The government has said schools will only reopen on the 1st of June if the 5 criteria are met, but they want them to be ready to reopen in case those 5 criteria are met. So it isn't actually as easy as a blanket. If they're not blanket saying on the 1st of June we're going to reopen whatever happens, they aren't saying that. So the arguments against it should take that into account, because they're not just going, back to work, whatever's going on, because they have conceded if the R rate raises or if other factors come into play, if there's a risk of the NHS being overwhelmed, if those 5 criteria aren't met, then schools are not going to reopen. However, even if those 5 criteria are met, I'm of the opinion that the number of cases within the population needs to be far lower than it is. We're still at the rate where we're having about 3,000 to 4,000 new confirmed cases every day. The deaths are going down, but the deaths are going down from cases that caught coronavirus 5 weeks ago and more, because if they're dying of it, they've probably done a fair stint in intensive care. Obviously not all of them, because some of them are care home deaths that have had no palliative care whatsoever. But basically, the hospitalised figures and the death figures are not representative of what is happening now. They are representative of what was happening weeks ago. We're still getting new cases in the thousands every day. So I think if that's the case, there's just too much of the virus in circulation for you to risk encouraging person-to-person contact, which essentially, there's no way of looking at it. Schools, particularly reception, was it year 1 and year 2 level, and year 6 level, children of that age are not going to be able to successfully social distance at all. So any of those children who have come into any parent of theirs who's or somebody in their family or somebody in their circle who's been exposed to the virus, they may well be carrying it and not have symptoms. And then that goes through all of those children in that class, or at least the most of them. I know there will be measures in place to minimise contact, but there's still going to be transmission. Also, just sitting in a classroom with someone for any length of time, it's going to be in the air, it's going to be moving around, there's going to be transmissions. Also, you're putting the teachers at unnecessary risk. So I am anti-schools opening anywhere on the 1st of June, and basically until the new daily cases are far further down, I think you're just risking a second peak, and we won't know that it's all gone tits up until we're already further down that path, and then you're back into exponential growth before you can do anything to put the brakes on.
It's better to be cautious, because finding out down the line is too late. And like you say, children of that age, it's just the nature of them. They're going to be, interacting, and they're not going to be able to have the self-discipline to kind of socially distance from all the other children. But also, that's before you even look at the practical, the impracticalities of social distancing within a school where there are sort of narrow corridors and cloakrooms that people have to share, and playgrounds and toilets and things. And what it seems to be not just true of schools, but also of businesses that are being encouraged to reopen and things like that. The government is kind of saying you're going to have measures in place and social distancing, but there doesn't seem to be much help
with getting those measures
how
in
to
place.
do that. It's just kind of, you need to be reopening and you need to sort it out.
Yeah, there are guidelines that have now been released to businesses. I have to admit, I haven't looked at them very closely because I know that my business is not one of the ones that can reopen. So I haven't done that reading.
But
sorry.
Even with guidelines, if the guidelines say, well, you've got to maintain this social distance and these are kind of the
but even that, all of them say, if possible.
Well, yes, and then so if not possible, do you just ignore them?
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? Or if they are possible, are they offering any support to kind of make it so, or is it just all on the businesses to kind of fund all the changes and make it done?
As far as I'm aware, it's all on the businesses to make it possible. So there's no extra budget for them to sort of take extra measures, extra precautionary measures, and you're already going to be talking about businesses that are strangled for funds right now. So I can't imagine they're going to be spending a huge amount of money on sort of screens and hand sanitizers and even just sort of marking boxes on the floor, because they just don't have money and they're desperate to get staff back in to start making money. I just don't think it's plausible.
There also seems to be this perception at the moment of just, all the teachers, they're just having another long holiday, aren't they? As if they're all at home enjoying themselves, if they don't have enough bloody holidays.
But yeah, that's
not
pissing
the
me
case
off.
At all, because
that's really pissing me off.
Teachers are still working really hard.
Yeah.
They're still going into schools in a lot of cases to support vulnerable students who need to come in to get meals or to have somewhere to be.
The children of key workers are still going to a hub. It won't be they're going necessarily to the same school that they went to. Usually it seems to be that a nominated school or leisure centre or whatever has become a hub for a local community, and any children of care workers or vulnerable children or what have you go to that hub every day. I know someone that works in one. That's how it's going. They're also, you've got to bear in mind, all of those teachers are having to rewrite their entire lesson plan and curriculum in order for those that workload to be sent home to be done as homeschooling. So essentially they've just doubled their workload. They're still working by a long, like, the idea that they're just having extra time off is absolute bullshit. And basically there's a lot of anti-union rhetoric going on, saying, the unions are not letting teachers go back to work. That's not the case, because also, by the way, you're forgetting what a union is. A union is a representative board of those people, so it will be teachers who work for the teaching union who are representing what the teachers say. Basically, I can't remember which teaching union it was. It was one of the ones I'd heard of, one of the big ones. There's sort of three big ones, but there was one of them had done a consensus, done a survey of all of its members, and 92% of them were against going back to school on the 1st of June. Basically, they don't feel safe, and I would have to agree with them. They're not safe. Also, particularly, I think the argument for why it is the youngest pupils that they would send back first doesn't hold water, because that level of teaching, like, I don't want to be dismissive of teachers who teach that level, but the parents or the caregivers who are currently looking after those kids are probably better able to manage homeschooling that age. I think it's basically down to childcare provisions. Older pupils, i.e. secondary school pupils, can be left at home while mum and dad go back to work. Whereas primary level pupils can't. And so this is actually not really about what's best for the pupils, what's best for their learning. Yes, of course, there are things that pupils do learn when they go to school, and suddenly things like having to share and sort of working to a schedule, working to a timetable, those sorts of things are established when you first go to school, and they are things that they will miss out on now, but they will pick up on them later. This is not like a kid that misses out on reception and then spends the rest of his life not understanding social cues. That's not how people work. So that's bullshit and doesn't hold water. Essentially, I feel like most of this is geared towards stimulating the economy, not geared towards the education of the children that we're talking about. I don't think it's safe for any, and I'd say this, whatever sort of group of people you're talking about. Unfortunately, the virus is too prevalent in the population to be encouraging people to be in the same space without very strict social distancing measures that must be mandatory, and if they can't be met, then you shouldn't be there. Look how hard it is just at the supermarket to get people to maintain social distancing. It's just too difficult for people to do, it seems. So I'm really, really pissed off with that whole rhetoric of anti-teacher, anti-union rhetoric, because essentially the unions are representing the interests of their members. Their members do not feel like it is safe to go back to work on the 1st of June, and I'm inclined to agree with them. Also, the British Medical Association agrees with them. So medical experts also back them up. So I essentially think, so the teachers who are actually going to have to do it, and medical professionals who know what they're talking about, both say it's not a good idea. Michael Gove says it is. I know who I'd trust.
Michael Gove.
Old pop face. Yeah, so it's kind of bullshit, and the thing that I'm nervous about, it's whipping up a sort of anti-key worker propaganda, basically. The idea is now being sort of pushed out there by newspapers like the Daily Telegraph and the Daily Mail. Essentially, to begin with, it was that teachers want to do it and the unions are holding them back, but then it's also kind of suggesting that teachers are being lazy and they just want time off and they're all on gardening leave, which is bullshit. That's just not the case. Yes, they're working differently, but they're all still working, and those that are teachers of sort of classes that you can't really set homework for, i.e. I guess PE and maybe cookery and technology and stuff, will be probably working in the hubs and doing other things and setting out curriculums for homeschooling and supporting like all of their pupils across all their age groups. There's a huge amount of work to be done. It would be easier for teachers to go back to work, and I'm sure they would rather do that than have to rewrite their entire year's curriculum with a moment's notice. That's what they've had to do. So it's bullshit, and I'm sick of it. It's also what's happening with people talking about nurses sort of being wasteful of PPE. I've seen people sort of criticising them for making TikTok videos when they should be saving lives, and it's like, fuck off. If you working in a job that is that difficult and you do anything that puts a little bit of a smile on your face, gives you a little bit of a relief from the relentless pressure, then have at it. Grab it with both hands and give a big fuck you to anybody who says otherwise, because essentially they don't know what they're talking about. They're just bullshitting.
Yeah.
People who are anti-lockdown can fuck the fuck off. I can assure you I've done my reading. Essentially, yeah, it could have been avoided if we'd done things differently, but it's too late for that now, so we've got to make the best of this. All the eggs are broken, we still got to make an omelette somehow, so we're picking up bits of egg off the floor, but we're doing what we can because we're heading for a second peak. If we relax lockdown, we're already looking at numbers of cases in the community that are way higher than they were when we implemented lockdown. If we relax it, it's going to skyrocket. That's how it will work with something that's got an incubation period as long as this illness does, and that is as contagious as this is. Keeping the R rate down by using lockdown and social distancing measures is the only realistic way we can do anything about this until A, there's a vaccine, B, there's a sort of working treatment for it if you catch it, or C, there is an absolutely fucking foolproof, rigorous tracking, testing and quarantining of people who have it. We don't have any of those things yet, so sadly we're stuck in this situation. I don't want to be. I want to be back in work. I know pretty much everybody is sick of this now. Like, the mental health repercussions are real and are valid, particularly for those of us who are living on our own, or the elderly community who are feeling incredibly isolated. Yes, there's knock-on effects to having lockdown that are detrimental to people's mental health, to people's physical health. Of course there are. But today, a survey done by, I can't remember the name of the surveying company, but it was through, it was a survey of doctors. It was over 2,500 doctors were surveyed. I can't remember the exact number. I think it was 2,800 or something, but I'll double check and put the link if I can find it. Basically surveyed doctors to see if they relax measures in hospitals to reinstate the services that have been cut back to allow for COVID. Overwhelmingly, the majority of them think they won't cope. They think they will be looking at a situation within the next few weeks where they will not cope. Those services, they're not ready to re-implement those services because everything is already, and still is, stretched too thin from the impact of COVID. If you reopen those, even if it's temporary, and then you have a spike in COVID, you're going to be looking at, I hope you watched the documentary, because the critical and intensive care documentary showed it very well. What has happened to allow for room to look after COVID patients is other wards have been turned into COVID wards. Other wards have been turned into extensions of intensive care. There isn't really the infrastructure to go, okay, yeah, you've still got to do all that and all of what is sort of routine. And that will have of course that will have a lasting impact and a detrimental impact on anybody who's waiting for a non-urgent surgery. Non-urgent surgeries become urgent after a while, like particularly if you're dealing with cancer patients or anything like that. And I'm not belittling or minimizing the detrimental effects of lockdown, but we're here now. We can't relax it just because it's inconvenient. Basically, if better decisions had been made in January, yeah, I would have been with you. I'd have been waving the flag for not needing lockdown because we had the resources to avoid it. But we don't. It's here now. Relaxing lockdown will essentially allow this virus to run rampant through the population, and within weeks, the NHS will crumble. And then we will be looking at scenes that we did see coming out of Italy, where the triage system comes to who gets the ventilator. It's not just ventilators, because actually that's one of the stories that's been talked about in the news, that has been really going like, it's okay, we've got enough ventilators. Well, actually, one of the things I read today that was a major problem with looking after COVID patients was a supply of enough oxygen. They didn't have enough. And that was detrimental to a lot of patients' care. They're having to sort of get all across the board resources that they just didn't have, and they were just pulling them out of thin air because they just don't stockpile enough of those things because they've never needed them before. And suddenly you've got an influx of patients with a certain type of illness and you just don't have enough resources to look after them. The NHS managed just. There will have been deaths that wouldn't have occurred if this hadn't happened, non-COVID deaths and COVID deaths, if they'd been better prepared. But they didn't get to the stage where they didn't have enough beds in the ICU. That does not mean they handled this and it was fine and therefore we can do this again. If we reopen up and we let this run rampant, we're looking to a second peak, which is going to be much worse than the first. And all of the talk that's going on and everything that's coming out of the newspapers, particularly the right-wing newspapers, but actually all of them, is suggesting to me that that's where we're headed. And that's fucking terrifying. So you idiots in Hyde Park who are protesting against lockdown, saying it's against your personal freedom, fuck the fuck off, or write a little list of everyone you know and pick the 5 out of 100 that you don't mind doing a stint in intensive care. Name them out loud, because they will. 5 people out of every 100 you know, well, all right, I'm exaggerating. 2 to 5 people out of every 100 you know will go to intensive care.
But also,
probably 1 in 5 of those will die. So
also,
fuck you.
Bear in mind though, in real life, obviously, you won't get to pick.
No.
So it may well be one of the ones you really care about.
Yeah, because actually listening to some of you dickheads talking on Facebook, I can think of a few names I wouldn't mind adding to that list. But it won't be you that go. Actually, if you're anti-lockdown, you might be raising your risk levels, but it could be somebody you give a shit about, who I would give a shit about, that gets this and dies.
It is.
So stop being selfish, stop licking your wounds and being boo-hoo, my freedom's being restricted. All of ours is, get over it.
But it is encouraging that in Bristol and Newport and
Cardiff and Plymouth,
very poorly attended. I mean, good for Plymouth, but particularly in our local.
No, I was just people who I know around the country who sort of they were anti-lockdown protests suggested for several locations. Turns out the organisers were actually people who are affiliated with Britain First. Make of that what you will. Right-wing dickheads. So they were suggesting anti-lockdown protests. Hyde Park did have a fairly well-attended one. We're not talking thousands, but a few hundred people showed up. Interestingly, quite a few of them wearing masks, which I didn't understand what they were doing.
Pick a team.
Pick a team, you fucking dickheads. But the thing that, if we could say the people taking those risks are only risking themselves, then I would be saying, fine, Darwin, have at it. But that's not the case. And you will be coming into contact with other people who are doing all of the right things, and they might be the ones that pay the price because you are being butthurt about all of this.
Because those people in Hyde Park are still going to be going to supermarkets and exercising where the rest of us are exercising and all of those things. So it's just spreading things even further, isn't it? And it's very frustrating.
It's very frustrating, and I'm very angry, and it's the first time I felt any energy all day today. Rage is very energizing.
Anger is
but
an
yes,
energy,
it is.
John Lydon once said.
Did he?
In the Sex Pistols.
Oh, right, okay. No. Isn't it Lydon?
Yes, probably.
Oh, right, okay. I was thinking, I don't know who John Lydon is.
I've said barely anything so far, and you've undermined me, the one thing that I try and say. It's all right.
Oh, I'm sorry, Babs.
Tell you what, though.
Talk about the Toy Story thing, because that's nice.
That is the one that I wanted to talk about most of all. We got a list of things, and it's we're going to get around to, one or two
I went
more
quite ranty, and I filled up most of the time.
Keir Starmer might be tomorrow.
Not sorry.
But I really wanted to talk about a thing that I saw today, which was, there's a Facebook group called Let's Remake a Movie, and what they did is different comedians around the country took a scene each from the film Toy Story, just literally a minute or two each, or less than that sometimes, and just remade the scene however they saw fit, and then the whole thing was edited together as one film with, as you can imagine, a cast of dozens of different people. I've seen a similar...
All in kind of homemade costumes and stuff,
Homemade costumes, there were bits of animation, and
cool.
Sort of very cheap special effects. I've seen a similar thing done before with RoboCop, where they got each scene remade by a different comedy troupe in America, but that was done kind of outside of lockdown conditions, and people had a bit more kind of budget
they could go
and things
out
to play
and do
with, and a bit more,
things,
and they could have go to an office block and film a set or whatever.
Right.
This was done just by comedians in their homes, very lo-fi a lot of the time. People were getting their kids involved. It was very charming. It was very wholesome. Unfortunately,
I can't provide a link to it.
No, you can't watch it anymore.
I didn't see it either.
The lawyers have got involved. It has been taken down after just a few hours, which is a shame. Although I did see a couple of people kind of saying, well, it's very petty and can't Disney see it's just people having some lockdown fun. What I would say to that, to be fair, is it's probably a case of, the way they do these things, it's literally they just run some sensor through the sound waves that are picked up.
They go,
this is
copyright infringement off
music or something, and it's not an individual sitting down and watching the thing and getting a sense of it. It's literally just automated. Yeah. So it is a shame. It'd be nice if there was some way of kind of appealing to Disney and going, look, this was just a bit of lockdown fun, and it's actually a nice tribute to your... And it was all universal as well. It wasn't sweary. It wasn't anything that Disney wouldn't approve of. But
and it's not going to like deter anyone from actually watching Toy Story, which I guess is mainly what copyright infringement is designed to do. It's like, no, you're taking away from profits that would have made for that company. Yeah. Well, this wouldn't have.
If anything, it's driven me to go back and watch Toy Story again and then come and comparing things. But the main thing about it was, even though you can't watch it now, I'm sorry, but you can't. But it was kind of really fun and uplifting and quite inspiring, you know. And I was seeing some things going, I don't know how someone's done that in their home. You know, I mean, they definitely did. I'm not suggesting they went outside, but I'm saying I'm not. You know,
it's just impressive
so
and
slick
inventive.
or polished or inventive, and that's amazing. Other things were equally creative, but you know, I'm not saying bits weren't very good, but they were done in very lo-fi ways where it's quite inspiring. Also, cause we've been making videos, and it makes me go, well, maybe I could do that with my movie. Maybe there's a way that I could do that, and it makes me want to kind of push myself and try new things.
Lovely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I do wish I'd seen it. It does sound like it was good. Maybe someone will release it by some means in some way. It sounds good.
I'm hoping they're going to have another attempt and do another one. And then we'll have to try and catch it live when it goes out. But even though it's only up for a few hours, I think it was well worth all the effort. And I say that as someone who had to do absolutely none of the work.
Yeah, so I think I have got a couple of real world things, but I think I'll leave them because I need to calm down.
Keir Starmer, bless him, we keep pushing him back in the running order, don't we?
To be honest, I don't know if we're going to end up getting to the stuff because it's not going to be relevant by the time we do. But
it's all right because eventually he'll have done something new, and we'll just pretend that's what we're going to talk about all along. We will talk about Keir Starmer tomorrow.
I will just very fleetingly mention that I did watch today's press briefing. And the main crux of it today was work that they are doing to work towards getting a vaccine. Still very much it was emphasised that while this work is happening, it isn't guaranteed that it will come to a vaccine. But they've added several, I can't remember exactly what the number is. I think it was an additional 84 million on top of the several hundred million that they had already dedicated to looking for this vaccine. Two main places that are looking for it is Oxford University and I think Imperial College London. They have actually started very early clinical trials, and they've also sped up the building or launching of a centre that would be able to mass produce the vaccine if it gets to that stage. So potentially, if this test of the vaccine goes perfectly and then there's no aftershocks, there's actually talk that potentially the first trials of mass trials could be as early as this September. And the company that they have gone into partnership with I don't actually know where they're based. They're an international company, but because they've gone into partnership with the universities that are creating the vaccine, they have pledged that the 100 million vaccines that they should be able to get out within 6 months from September, 30 million of those will be guaranteed to go to the UK public because it was the UK labs that tested them. There's 67 million of us, so there's a bit of a shortfall there, but that has potential to be hopeful. I'm a little bit nervous about a vaccine that would normally take years to come to market being sped to market that quickly, because I don't know, have you seen Children of Men?
No.
Right, well, in Children of Men, I can't remember what causes it in Children of Men, but basically what happens in Children of Men is it's about sort of, it's several years in the future after something causes the global population to become infertile, and so nobody's being born, and then there is a baby, and I can't remember why there's a baby, but basically I was just like, mass producing and not being able to test the long-term effects of a vaccine and then putting it out to everybody on the planet might have some unwanted side effects that you don't know about until later.
Real world examples, of course, of that, but I don't know if we want to really dwell on those.
No, let's not for
negative,
now. But yeah, so there's potential for hope there, and I think that would be very optimistic, because this is only the first stage of trials, but they did say that they essentially want to be in the position where they would be ready to mass produce it if it works. If not, those facilities that have been created can still do mass production of other vaccines and can do other medical work that will be valid. It's not like they're going to be sitting twiddling their thumbs until this vaccine's completed. But it does mean that if everything goes well, that's something that there's a bit of optimism there, with the caveat that it might not be possible, but they are throwing a lot at it. Again, further proof that they are spending huge amounts of money to make this all go on. So as well as the anti-lockdown folk, who are like, I disagree with, obviously, but most of their thinking is grounded in reality. The conspiracy theorist folks, who are suggesting that this COVID thing isn't as bad as it is, and the governments are putting us into lockdown to control us. And I was like, well, why? Like, oh, it's all about the money. I'm like, well, they're spending fucking trillions. Also, the idea that every government on the planet has all suddenly decided to work together in harmony to just control us all. Like,
it's a very sweet
get them
notion,
to agree on anything. Like, the idea that the whole world is suddenly going to work together to fuck with you, Janet.
Oh, but
like, it's just
not
not
heard of the Illuminati.
I do know a couple of actual Janets. The reason I said Janet is because I was having a chat with an actual Janet about this yesterday.
Oh, she was a proper Janet, I tell you.
She was...
I've got nothing against the name Janet. That's my mum's name. But
that's why I thought I'd cover that. Yeah, I don't mean you, Janet.
But before we go, I'd like to plug something.
Okay.
Because I'm aware that some people watch these like a few days behind, and then by the time I plug something that's happening like that night or the night after, they miss the
Get
thing.
in there.
So
Get in there, Babs, because we're running low.
We're filming this on Sunday. It'll go out on Mondays, which hopefully should give a couple of you some time. Ignacio Lopez, the comedian, is filming a comedy special that he's broadcasting on Facebook on Wednesday.
Lovely.
If you don't know Ignacio's work, he's very funny.
He's brilliant. He is really, really good. Just one of the little clips he did on the belly laughs thing we did was brilliant. So you'll be in for a treat. It'll be really, really good.
And it's going to be a whole new hour of stuff all about like lockdown life and everything. It's not going to be his old material being recycled. It's a whole new, brand new show about everything we've all been going through. And also, I believe that I'm right in saying he's pre-filming it. He's going to broadcast it live on Wednesday night, but he's pre-recording it, so it's not going to be, you know, a comedian
glitchy and delayed and
talking into his
lag
phone and
his production value for stuff is always brilliant.
I was going to say, he runs a quiz every Saturday, and you know, he's worked really hard getting borders up and a backdrop, so it looks really slick, and it doesn't even look like it's filmed in his house. So it's going to be kind of good production values.
What time does it go out
It's
on
not going to
Wednesday?
be one of those things that you feel like it's a chore to watch. It's going to be, it's in the evening. I think it's going to be like 7:30.
I will check and I'll put the link in the blurb.
Absolutely.
But Wednesday evening.
And you can find him on Twitter at Comedy Lopez.
And on Facebook at /Comedy Lopez as well.
There you go. So yeah, check that out. That's really good.
That'll be really good. Okay, we'll probably have to call it a day there, because we're gradually stretching over our 30-minute mark by a little bit further and further every time. So we'll call it a night there. Tomorrow, hopefully, I will be less cross.
All right.
But I promise nothing. I might have to limit my Facebook time. Right. Bye, guys.
Bye.